Good evening, everyone, and welcome. We'll get started in just a moment. As you do tune in, please turn on your camera so you're here and ready to go. We'll get started in just a moment. All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our call this evening. I'm so happy to be here with all of you tonight. My name is Kareem Premji. I'm a holistic nutritionist and also a teacher in the field of holistic health. And the purpose of tonight is to introduce you to something called the balance concept. And I'm also going to introduce you to one of the most important health tests that you can do for yourself that your doctor may have likely never shared with you. But as a holistic nutritionist and a teacher in this field, I think is very valuable for your well-being and also the well-being of those that are around you, your friends, your family, coworkers, people that you care about. And it's information that could literally save your life and it could also save their lives. So it is definitely going to be an important call. And also just make sure that you take a few notes. If you have any questions, be sure to get back to the person that invited you here tonight. They can also send you a lot more literature, documentation, and other videos that you might need to review afterwards. But I have a very important question to ask you, and that is, if you could reduce your chance of ending up here, would you act today or wait until it happens? Now, obviously, I knew you would say you'd probably act today and do something about it, and we don't like to see pictures like this. But I don't want to sugarcoat anything. And I really want to get to the impact of what I'm trying to say because unfortunately, a lot of people today definitely want to feel better. They want to be healthier. They want to live a longer life. But the problems that we're seeing today are growing in numbers. And you might be noticing that yourself. You're seeing a lot more people today are having health issues. They're dealing with things, and sometimes they come, I should say many times they come unexpectedly, and there's very little we can do at that moment. And that's why I'm saying if you had the opportunity to make a difference, would you do it? And I think when we sit down and have a conversation like this, we typically say, yeah, absolutely. If I knew what to do, what to test for, I would do it, right? How many of you agree that that would be the smartest thing to do? Absolutely. So tonight, I really want to introduce you to two tests. One is, have you ever heard or even tested your blood for the omega-6-3 ratio and the omega-3 index? And if you haven't, then this is a very important message for you to hear tonight. So you're definitely at the right place at the right time to be looking into this and how this could really change the outcome of your well-being. Now, just so you know, in one single drop of blood, there are over 250 million red blood cells. And those red blood cells can provide such an insight into our well-being if we just know what to look for. So tonight we're going to talk about that. One of the things we're going to talk about is what is the omega-3 index. We're also going to look at what the omega-6 to 3 ratio is. These are key things that typically, you know what, when you go to your doctor, they're not included in your regular lab work. And so tonight, you're going to see why they're important to get tested and what it could mean for you. And if you are out of balance, what to do to get back into a state of balance. Now, the first question is, what is the omega-3 index? Well, as I mentioned, in our blood, we have all these red blood cells. And one of the things we can take a look at is what those red blood cells are made out of. Now, a lot of people don't know that all cells in your body, including your red blood cells, are surrounded by what's called a cell membrane. This is the outer wall of the cell, and that cell membrane is actually made out of a whole bunch of different types of fats, fatty acids. And those fatty acids really determine how well your red blood cells work, and in fact, how well all the cells in your entire body work to ensure that you are healthy, vibrant, and have vitality. And what's really intriguing is we can look at that and see what they're composed of, which types of fats are there, and we can actually determine how big of a risk factor you have for a lot of different health issues today. So we're going to look at that. And just your understanding what the omega-3 index is looking at, if we take a small section of your red blood cells and we look at the number of fatty acids that are there. So in this little example here, we do a little zoom in and we see that there's 64 little tiny fatty acids or fats in there. If three out of those 64 are your omega-3s, usually you'll notice omega-3s as EPA or DHA. 3 out of 64 is 4.6% of the total, which means your omega-3 index is 4.6%. That means 4.6% of all of the fats that make up the membrane are going to be omega-3s. Of course, the other ones might be saturated fats, they might be omega-6s, there might be a whole bunch of other things there, but we really want to know why your levels of omega-3 are so low. And later on, we're going to compare that to your levels of omega-6. Now, this might be a little complicated as a conversation, and I don't want you to get too overwhelmed. That's not the purpose of what I'm trying to share with you tonight. I just want you to know that there is a way to look at your red blood cells, at your tissues, and see what's going on. And when we do these types of tests, it gives us such a big insight. Now, I'm going to share something a colleague of mine did. He did a test through his doctor. And in Canada, we've got a lab called Life Labs. And I just wanted you to see what they are allowed to write on the report as per the requirements here in Canada. So I'm just using this report as an example to show you why you want to get this tested and what those numbers could mean. Now remember, this isn't what Kareem is saying. This is what is actually physically written on a Life Labs report. And it simply says here that if your omega-3 whole blood scores are in the highest quartile, meaning they're in between 6 and 10%, they were associated with an 80% lower risk of sudden death compared to individuals with whole blood scores of 2.1 to 4.3%. Okay, now this friend of mine, this client of mine, they started with a whole blood score of 3.54. So obviously they were concerned. They didn't want to stay there, but we definitely changed it for them. But look what it says underneath that. A red blood cell omega-3 value of 8 to 11% offers the greatest protection against sudden myocardial infarction. That's basically like a heart attack. And your omega-3 index equivalence score is at 4.36%. So again, he wasn't in the 8 to 11%. And it says this test was referred to University Health Network Laboratory Medicine Program here in Toronto. So I just wanted you to know that if there was this metric that said if you can get your omega-3 index above 8%, how many of you now see that that is a very important health marker to know? It's also a very important health marker to test. But why are people not testing it and why do they not know about it? Well, that's why you're on this call tonight. And as a nutritionist, as a teacher in this field of holistic health, I feel very passionate about sharing this because I think everybody needs to hear this message. There are places in the world, like in Japan, where they are typically in that range. They're above 8%. But when we look at North America and Europe, we see that we are in the undesirable range. And this means that sudden cardiac death rates in the United States and Europe are about 20 times higher than in Japan. So if you know that the number one killer out there is a heart attack, and there were things that you could do to switch your risk factor, would you do it? And we've all heard the saying, let food be your medicine and medicine be your food. How many of you agree with that? How many of you feel that's the way we should proceed? It's not medications. It's not, taking a pill every day, just to deal with a symptom. We need to look at what's going on in our diet and see what needs to be corrected and go back to the basics. How many of you feel that would be one of the most powerful things we can do for our well-being? Now, um, the one thing that I want you to get from that is things have changed in our food system. If you go back and look at what your ancestors ate, if you go back to your grandparents, your great grandparents, you'll notice that they ate foods that were local to their environment and most of which were whole foods. They ate grass-fed animals, they had lots of vegetation, they ate some, good cultivated grains, they had nutrient-rich soils, they got a lot of fiber in the diet, and they had a good balance of fats coming in from good sources. So they were eating a really good whole food diet. But then we started to move into the cities. And as we moved into the cities, our food systems then became part of an industrial process. And the industrial process, the intention is basically to feed a lot of people and be as shelf stable as possible. And it should also taste good because it turns into a business. How many of you understand that idea? And as a result of that, a lot of the foods that we're eating today are low in nutrients, they're high in sugar, they're full of empty calories, they're low in fiber, and we have an imbalance in the types of fats that I'm talking about with you that we're testing in our red blood cells. Not only that, it's not just us that are eating the wrong things, our animals are eating the wrong things. Look at chickens, look at beef, look at fish. All these things, they are now being, industrially farmed, and they're just trying to fatten them up and give them foods that make them heavier and bigger quicker. And that's not typically their natural diet. So they also have an imbalance. They're also suffering from health issues, but we don't notice it because we're just looking to eat their tissues. So there's a problem not only in the animal agriculture, but also all of the industrial foods that are now pre-prepared and packaged that we find in our grocery stores. Now, some of you are already intelligent. You go to the grocery store and you shop around the aisle. How many of you kind of do that right now? You're like, okay, I'm going to avoid all those aisles in between. Most of my grandparents would have never known what any of those things are anyways. They're really not real foods. But if you look at the population at large, unfortunately, they still do buy a lot of packaged foods. But at the same time, we also go out and we eat foods that are prepared by restaurants or they're fast food, and sometimes it's unavoidable. And as a result of that, if we look at the trend in our use of vegetable oils, how many of you see that drastic rise from nothing in the early 1900s to so many millions metric tons, over 210 million metric tons of vegetable oils, which are actually seed oils, and they are now a dominant part of the fatty acids or fats that we are now consuming. But just so you know, seed oils are not a natural part of our diet. They're a new invention, and they have to go through a huge industrial process to even make them edible. If you look at that whole line there of cleaning and drying and dehulling and flaking and degumming and neutralizing and bleaching and winterizing and oil blending and deodorizing to create an edible oil, you'll see that's not a natural food. Now, the problem with seed oils and our current agriculture is that we need to know the difference between omega 6 and omega 3. Now, omega 6s are the dominant type of fat in our seed oils, okay? And we need a little bit of omega 6. We're going to talk about why we need a little bit, but we also need a balance of omega 3s. Now, omega 6s and omega 3s are both considered essential fats for humans. When I say they're essential, that means our body needs them. We cannot make them, which means they must come from our food supply. They must come from the foods that we eat, whether they're from the food or from a supplement, okay? Now, what omega 6's role in the body is to do is to create the inflammatory process. So, whenever you get a cut or you get injured or something, how many of you realize that it gets hot, it inflames, it gets swollen? That reaction, for that to occur properly, your body pulls in omega 6 from that cell membrane I talked about and initiates the process of inflammation. So we need omega 6 to light the fire of inflammation. Is that important? Yes. Whenever you do get injured, you want inflammation because it's part of the healing process. Inflammation is the first phase. But then a couple of hours or a couple of days later, the next phase is to pull in omega 3s, and omega 3s actually turn off or complete the inflammatory cycle. So they are there to cool things back down and finish the healing process over the next couple of days and weeks so that that tissue is healed correctly. So how many of you now see that they both have a role to play? Omega 6s create the inflammation and omega 3s complete it and turn it off. They're the cooling mechanism that we need. Now, the problem is when we have an imbalance, and that's exactly what has happened. We now have way too much omega 6 in our diets. Think about all the vegetable oils that we're consuming, all the seed oils in our processed foods when people go out to eat. So we have an overabundance of the fire causing fatty acid, which is omega 6, and not enough omega 3. And when that balance is not in balance, we're going to start seeing issues in our tissues. Does everybody get that? So we're going to see issues in our tissues, whether it's in our brain, our skin, our organs, our joints. We're going to see a myriad of problems manifesting as a result of an inflammatory process that never ended. It just continued to burn and burn and burn inside of ourselves. And this is what we call silent inflammation until we actually physically see it, right? Until we see it as a skin eruption, eczema, psoriasis. We see it as weight gain, metabolic problems. We see it as mental health issues, cognitive problems. We see it as cardiovascular issues, type 2 diabetes. All of these at the root cause, inflammation plays a role. So now that we know what omega 6 is and we know that we need omega 3, what happened to create this imbalance and where are we at? Well, as I said, it all happened because of our food supply. So if we look back at the 1800s and before 1960s, you'll see that we had a ratio of omega 6 to omega 3 of 4 to 1 or less. Does everybody see that? Okay, so 4 to 1 was the general ratio of omega 6 to omega 3. Now, science recommends that we should have a 3 to 1 ratio for overall well being. Okay, but now when we look and test people, we find that people are at 25 to 1 and even a 40 to 1 omega 6 to omega 3 ratio. This means that remember when I talked about the omega 3 index and I said a certain percentage is your omega 3s? Imagine having 40 times the omega 6 in that cell membrane as opposed to omega 3s. Does everybody see how that could be a problem? Now, the other question is, are we now being inundated by more toxicity, radiation, chemicals, stress, and other types of injury to our tissues on a daily basis. How many of you agree that it's worse off today than it's ever been before? And as a result, we're being bombarded by things that initiate inflammation in the body. Does everybody get that we're now being bombarded a lot more than when we lived outside of the cities? And that's the problem. We are always in a state of inflammation. So when we're inflamed and when we're out of balance, this is going to be a huge issue. And if the ideal is 3 to 1, and people are generally at 25 to 1 on average, this is likely the most critical proxy of systemic inflammation that is not being tested, and people don't even know to test for it. Science now shows that the omega-3 index is likely a more predictive risk factor than LDL cholesterol. And how many people take medications today to deal with cholesterol? Do you think maybe they're going down the wrong path? Maybe they should be looking at their omega-3 index as well and address that problem instead of looking at a symptom like cholesterol. Okay, and just so you know, as nutritionists, we know how important cholesterol is for the body. We never vilify it because we know that it's just a symptom and not the root of the problem. Okay, so what I wanted to share here is that if your cells are out of balance, your cells make up your tissues make up your organs, and if that's the case, that means you're going to have dysfunction in many areas of your body. Now, let's go back to the cell and let me look at that cell membrane again. Okay. When we're looking at the cell membrane, what I want you to notice is that when we have an incorrect balance of these types of fats, it actually changes the function of that cell membrane. It becomes more hard and rigid. This means that it's very hard for nutrients to get in and waste to get out of your cell. And if your cells are operating this way, that means your tissues are operating that way, which means your organs are not functioning properly. Does everybody get the problem is a root problem and it's a cellular problem? What we need to do is get it back into a state of balance. We need to bring it to a state where it's more fluid, where the right fatty acids have the right ratio. And when they do, then nutrients can come into the cell and waste can get out. And now our cells work better, our tissues work better, and our organs can work better as well. Does everybody get? We're trying to get to the root of the problem and fix it. And we need to do that at that level. So the question is, if the danger zone is a 25 to 1, and most people are headed in that direction. And the ideal is a 3 to 1. What do we need to do next? Well, you can always go to your doctor and request the test and pay for it, but sometimes that's difficult. You have to convince them, it's expensive, and you have to draw a lot of blood, and it could take a whole day, and it's not that necessarily the best approach. What I love about what this company Zinzino put together is that they created an in-home dry blood spot test that you can do anonymously, and you don't have to ask permission from anybody. You don't have to educate anybody. You can just get the test and do it from home. And all you need is 1 drop of blood. We put it on this test card, and it then gets sent to an office in your country. So if you're in Canada, we just send it to an office here in Toronto, and they then mail it to one of the most prestigious labs in the world called Vitas Analytics. Vitas Analytics is a specialist in the area of dry blood spot testing. They originally were created on the university campuses in Oslo, Norway for the Olympics. And since then, for over 30 years, they've become the official partners of Harvard University, the University of Cambridge, the Max Planck Institute, King's College in London, and a whole bunch of other big institutions now use Vitas Analytics to do a lot of their lab testing work. So we're not going to a small little tiny lab. We're actually sending it to the best lab that knows how to do the proper assessment of 11 different types of fatty acids that make up your red blood cell membrane. So we're not looking at what you ate last night, which is what a typical blood test looks at, what's floating around. We're looking at the actual composition of the red blood cell. Does everybody get that? It's a big difference. And this tells us what your red blood cells have been made out of. And most red blood cells have a 4-month lifespan. So this means it gives us a good idea of the type of foods you've been eating, the supplements you've been eating, and where your balance lies. Now, Zinzino has now had over 1.5 million tests done through Vitas Analytics through our dry blood spot test. And guess what? Out of 1.5 million people being tested, 97% of people who test are not in balance. They're in that danger zone. They're in that inflammatory zone. Okay, so we now know that globally, when people do their test, it's an eye opener for them. And I've tested nutritionists, I've tested naturopathic doctors, I've tested my clients, I've tested friends and family, and guess what? All of them have consistently failed the test, which means they are not in balance and their omega 6 to omega 3 ratio is way beyond that 4 to 1. Here's an example of one of my colleagues. He got tested and he was a 29 to 1 omega 6 to omega 3, which means he's got 29 times the omega 6 as opposed to omega 3. And his omega 3 index was a 2.3%. Do you guys remember that the goal that we want to get to for what I shared with you earlier is above that 8%? So he's in that 2.3% range, very undesirable, high risk factor for cardiovascular problems and a whole bunch of other problems. So do you now see that it was an eye opener for him as well? Do you guys see that that was one of the best things he could have done, which is get tested? Now, the question here is, okay, you can get tested and I can find out what's going on in my system. The goal tonight is not to scare you, it's to give you clarity. Does everybody get that? Because when you can test, you're no longer guessing. You can actually change the path that you're headed in if you know what to do. So, what I loved about the Zinzino model is that they made testing accessible to whoever wanted to do it. In fact, this test kit can be sent from Zinzino to people in over 100 countries worldwide. So we no longer have to depend on the medical system that exists in certain countries. We can get the test directly into people's hands and let them know exactly what's happening in their body. Now, what I liked about Zinzino's test also is that there's no risk. If you get tested and you find out that you are in balance, which means you're eating the right foods, you're taking the right things to keep you in balance, you can get a full refund on the lab work. Now, think about that. If you go to your doctor and do the test and you pass the test, you still pay for the test. Does everybody get that? When you do it through Zinzino, if you pass the test, you do get a refund, which is fantastic. But 97% of people will not pass the test and they will need some help. Now, the question is, so many people today take fish oil, which is high in omega 3. Why are they not in balance? I'm going to explain that in just a moment. Okay, I'm going to show you why fish oils don't work, why I teach my students why the regular fish oil industry is doing things incorrectly. That's not really changing the dial on your numbers. So you're going to learn that in just a moment. But I did want to give you a glimmer of hope. And that glimmer of hope is that we do have the protocol to get you back into balance in as little as 120 days. And why can we say this? Because out of the million people that are on our protocol, we've proven it through their blood work that our protocol works. Okay? So, although testing is really important, you want to know where you're at. And we've proven that with over 1 million blood samples. And then we published a study recently looking at over 500,000 of those. And you can pull the study yourself. You'll see right now that the world is out of balance, but we actually have a solution to deal with this problem. So now I'm going to explain why we're not able to get into balance by using regular fish oils. And this might be surprising to you because everybody I talk to, that's one of the top supplements they're already taking. You know, they take a multivitamin, they take a fish oil, they might take a probiotic. These are the top three that people typically use. I also know this because I used to be a store manager of a health food store here in Toronto for over 5 years. So I know exactly what people were putting in their shopping cart. I know all the major brands of fish oils. Trust me, I've been in that field. I'm an expert in that area as well. Okay, so I'm coming from experience. I know exactly what people were buying. And this was new insight to me. This is stuff I didn't know that I had never learned in nutrition school that I learned by being part of Zinzino. And that is this, that fish oils are missing a very important piece of the puzzle. Something that exists in fish but is removed, and that is something called polyphenols. If there's one word that you write down tonight, or there's one word that you are going to use ChatGPT and do some research on, I really want you to look into polyphenols. I'm going to briefly explain their importance and why they make a huge difference, and what the ramification of that is of not having them in fish oils. Now, if you look at our oceans and you see the little microalgae, microalgae are the things that create omega 3s. But what microalgae do when they create omega 3s is that they bind them or attach omega 3s to an antioxidant called a polyphenol. Now, some people know about polyphenols because they're in teas, they're in olives, they're in many different fruits and vegetables, but they're different types. But in essence, microalgae create a fat based polyphenol that is bound to the omega 3 inside of the algae. Now, when little tiny fish, when little tiny fatty fish like our sardines and mackerel and all those other things eat the microalgae, they get the omega 3s into their tissues delivered with the polyphenols. Everybody got that? So omega 3s are usually attached to polyphenols, and those, when they are eating the microalgae, deliver the omega 3s into the tissues of the little tiny fish. So it is a really important part of the omega balance, and it's what delivers the omegas into the tissues, and it protects them from what we call oxidation or damage. So if we have something that can prevent oxidation and damage of those very fragile oils, that is a very important thing. It's a very important step. Unfortunately, the fish oil industry, when they press the oil out of fish, they have to clean it and distill it. Just like our seed oils that I talked about earlier, has to go through an industrial process. When they clean those oils, unfortunately, they also wash away the polyphenols. Everybody got that? So when they wash away those polyphenols, unfortunately, they are no longer in the fish oil, which means a lot of the fish oils today have low absorption, high levels of oxidation, they have a lower potency, a shorter shelf life, they're improperly purified, and they go rancid very quickly. Now, how many of you have ever opened up a fish oil bottle of gel caps or an oil and smelt it and be like, I really don't want to take this? And you try to give it to your kids or whatever else, they're like, I really don't want to take this. Well, if it smells rancid, it likely is rancid. Does everybody get what I just said? Fish oil should not smell fishy. If it does, it likely is rancid. When you go to the market and you're buying fresh fish, if it smells off, do you tend to buy it or do you skip it? You probably say, I'm not going to buy that. It smells rancid because those oils are very, very fragile. They go rancid very quickly. And of course, fish oils don't contain the polyphenols. So now you understand why, when we've tested 1 million people, and out of the 1 million people, 97% fail the test because their omega 3s aren't at the right level. Many of them are existing fish oil users. Okay. and those fish oils are not getting into their tissues. The body is detoxifying them because they are already rancid. Do you now understand the problem with regular fish oils? Hopefully, you get it now. You're now an expert. Um, and what I loved about Zinzino is they corrected this problem, but they did it 15 years ago in Europe. Now, we're here in North America. Most of us on this call, we're like, why don't we know about this? They're 15 years ahead in Europe because Zinzino, which is a Norwegian company, actually created the balance test and something called the balance oil, which solved this polyphenol problem. And it's a quite simple solution, but it actually made a huge difference in helping people get back into balance. So what Zinzino did is that they looked for a source of polyphenols that were fat-based, but that were very clean and also very good for the human diet. Now, we've all heard the Inuit diet, which is high in omega 3s, which is really good for cardiovascular health and brain health. But we've also heard about the Mediterranean diet, which is rich in olives, olive fruit, and olive oil. And olive fruit, when it's in its pre-harvest state, is the highest in its polyphenol content. So what Zinzino did is they pressed the oil of these pre-harvest olives. Again, it's not a culinary oil, it's a medicinal oil pressed for its polyphenol content. And then at a molecular level, they reattach the omega 3s to the polyphenol. So when people take the balance oil for the first time, they are blown away that it does not smell like a fish oil. It does not taste like a fish oil. It actually tastes like an olive oil. So, in fact, 40% of the bottle is a polyphenol rich extra virgin olive oil that is rebound to the omega 3s in fatty fish. So, taking one bottle a month of balance oil is equivalent to eating a piece of salmon every day and over 300 polyphenol rich olives. It is quite an amazing food that is being missing in our plates. So this is why the balance oil works. It's because it has the omega 3s bound to the olive polyphenols. They protect the integrity of the oil and they deliver them into our tissues, into the cell membrane. And guess what? We can actually test and see that it's actually happening. So that's what we encourage people to do. When they get into Zinzino as a client that is considering what to do about their well-being, we say, before you even take the balance oil, take our test. And then take the balance oil consistently for 120 days. And then we're going to test you again and show you how your numbers have changed and how you can get back into a state of balance. And this, my friends, is what's called test-based nutrition. We're no longer guessing what you need. We test first, and then we give you the solution, and then we test again to prove that the solution is working. Now, how many of you currently take a fish oil or a multivitamin or whatever, and you're always asking yourself, I wonder if it's really doing anything? Like, is it really working? Am I spending the right money? Am I buying the right brand? We don't know. The only way to know is to test. How many of you see that's the future of personalized healthcare? Test-based nutrition. That's where we're at. Now, Zinzino has made it more affordable and more economical than going to a doctor and getting it done through that method. And I'm going to explain why. In Canada, the test kit is $166 Canadian. In the United States, it's $115. Now, with your test kit, by setting up your subscription for the balance oil, your first bottle of the balance oil is included for free with your test kit. Everybody got that? So you order your test kit, you get a bottle of balance oil with it. The intention there is that you'll do your test, you'll send it off. It takes about 2 to 3 weeks to get your results. And while you're waiting, start taking the balance oil. Why do you want to do that? Well, we know that 97% of people who do the test are going to fail the test. Already got that? So we know that's going to happen. So why not get a head start on getting back into a state of balance? So Zinzino was kind enough to include a bottle that's worth almost $60 here in Canada, absolutely for free with your test kit. Then, as long as you keep staying on the balance oil for 4 months, after 4 months, Zinzino will send you another test kit for free with your balance order in that fifth month. So, what this means is that Zinzino is giving you two tests and a free bottle for that 166 in Canada or the 115 in the United States. So it then becomes less expensive, in fact, half the cost of going to your family doctor and getting the same test. And even if you do it through your family doctor, remember they're not going to have the balance oil. The balance oil is exclusively available through Zinzino. So the beauty here is we offer the testing that you can do from home. We have the solution to get you back into balance, and then we test you again to show you that you are actually back in a state of balance. What I love about this is that 95% of people who do our protocol, they do the test, take the product for at least 4 months, test again, 95% are back in balance within that 4 month period. And that is quite profound. The reason I say that's quite profound is this. If I go back to this slide here where I shared that globally 97% of people are not in balance, they're out of balance, and you are then in balance after 4 months, you are now in the top 3% of human beings on our planet. Let that sink in for a minute. Let that sink in for a minute. By doing the protocol and getting back into a state of balance, you are now ahead of 97% of the world's population. In North America, that's over 99% of everybody walking around. You're that one percenter that is actually in a state of balance. Now, as a nutritionist, understand that if I can do that for someone, I really feel I've done the best thing I can for their well-being. How many of you get why I'm so passionate about this? This is what I trained for. I went to school for many years. This is what I now teach at a college here in Canada for holistic nutritionists. And the fact that I now have a way to test, get people back into balance, and prove it through blood work really resonated with me when I saw Zinzino. And I said, you know what? This I had never heard of. This is so fantastic. And you know what? This is something that can serve everyone out there. Whether it's a mother that's breastfeeding a brand new child that needs omega 3s coming into her diet so that the child's brain develops properly, or if it's a young child growing up, or if it's somebody in their prime, or it's somebody who is out there busy working and dealing with a lot of stress, or it's our elderly parents or grandparents, everybody needs omega 3s every day in their plate. And it's becoming more and more expensive to buy quality fish. And we have to be worried about the heavy metals. And so it's no longer the solution, and taking regular fish oils are not working. So this was the big frustration, and I'm so happy that when I saw Zinzino, I saw a way that we could actually help a lot of people get back into a state of balance. Now, the other thing I want to leave you with is that Zinzino starts with that. That's our core system, but we don't stop there. We know that getting your omega-6-3 ratio corrected is important. We know that raising your omega-3 index to that 8 to 10% is really important, but that's just the beginning. We know that there are other systems in the body. We have our gut microbiome, we have our immune system, and guess what? We have tests for those, and we've got solutions for those as well. So everything goes down to you test. If there is something that's out of balance, we have a solution that you can implement, test again, and see that you are now correcting that issue. And again, we're getting to the root cause of the problem. Now, one of the other products I love to share that Zinzino has is something called Viva. How many of you know people today that are suffering from anxiety, poor sleep, depression, and they're always in a state of stress? Now, your body cannot heal when it feels unsafe. How many of you have already understood that? Anytime you're in stress and stress mode, we release stress chemicals throughout our body, and that in itself creates inflammation. That in itself is going to tell your cells to pull in omega 6 and begin inflammation in the body. Stress can do that. What I liked about Viva is that it's made out of saffron, and this instantly relaxes your central nervous system, allows you to rest, and allows you to get into a peaceful healing state. So I always encourage my clients, my friends, my family to take the balance oil, add the Viva on top because we need to lower the stress response. We need to make them feel happier and better as we get them into balance. So Viva has been a game changer. I love it. It's
Yes,
made a huge difference, and I just wanted to
and
share that as well with all of you. All right. Now, getting into balance obviously is step one, right? We want you to get into a state of balance, but how many of you know that you don't want to just be in balance, you want to thrive? You want to be the best version of yourself. Well, guess what? We now have over 100 Olympic athletes that are now using the Zinzino protocol around the world. 100 Olympians, people that are the best in their sport, and they now use our products because they work and because they want the edge in performance. And when you are in balance and when you can resolve inflammation quickly, you're able to train harder and more frequently. How many of you understand that's a competitive edge in sports? If you go out there and you exert yourself and you practice your sport and you build inflammation in the body, which is a natural response, but you recover from that faster, you can train again faster. Does everybody get that's an advantage in sports? That's why our athletes love our products and our testing because they can be more resilient and they can be better at their sport. So I just wanted to share that once you're in balance, it doesn't end there. It's about what do you want to accomplish in your life? What's stopping you from being more active? What are the aches and pains that you focus on every day that you wish you could actually resolve so that you could actually be more resilient? So this is why I wanted to share that our athletes are our sports ambassadors, they don't get paid to endorse us. They do it because they know it works. Okay. Now I'm going to shift gears now. For those of you who came on this call tonight to learn more about how you can get back into balance, you've now seen it's very simple. You're going to get back to the person that invited you and request how you can get your hands on the test kit, the free bottle of balance oil, and take our protocol and our challenge. But I'm going to ask you to stay for a few more minutes and understand that we have a lot of work to do here in North America. Yes, we've been around. Zinzino's been around for 20 years. They are out of Norway. They are operating in over 100 countries worldwide. They are a publicly traded company on the NASDAQ, and they're doing financially extremely well because they're actually helping people. But we still haven't helped enough people. In fact, in Canada, we've only tested less than 9,000 Canadians out of our 40 million. In the United States, we've only tested less than, I'd say 10,000, 20,000 people or 40,000 people, something like a small town out of the 400 million people. So basically, we've done nothing in North America to make a dent. And we need people that can share this with us and get people on these calls. And as a customer of Zinzino, you can refer them if you'd like, and you can actually get your products for free. So if that's something that intrigues you, and you say, you know what, I like the idea of sharing something, I'm going to use it myself, and I can definitely tell my friends or family members about it. We do have a program where once you're a customer, you can send them your link, just like you would on Amazon or your banking app or whatever. When they become a customer and you have four of them, now your bottle becomes free every month. So that's one thing our customers can do. But if you're serious about looking at this as potentially a practitioner, a wellness entrepreneur, or something like that, and you see that there's a future here to create a new type of income opportunity by helping people, I'd like you to consider our partner opportunity because we're positioning ourselves in front of the next global trend, which is test-based nutrition. And just so you know the numbers, right now, 500 million people already take omega-3 fish oil. Guess what? They just don't know if it's working or not. And what we're doing is we're saying, look, the market already understands the need for this. They just don't know that they can test and that there's a better solution out there. So one of the things that we do is we just ask the question, hey, are you currently using omega-3s? Okay, and if you are, do you want to know if they're working or not? Are you wasting your money or is it really making a difference in your well-being? Now, if you ask that question to people, what do you think they might say? Yeah, I'd love to know. Like I'm spending money every month on fish oils and omega-3s. I'd love to know if it's actually making a difference. There's other people you might talk to, and they might say, I don't use omega-3s because I don't know if they work or not, or I don't know about the science, or I never considered it. Then we can ask them, hey, if you're not using omega-3s right now, do you want to know if you're deficient and if your diet is giving you enough omega-3s that you need to support your well-being? Does everybody get what I just did? Whether they're a user or they're not a user of omega-3s, we just want them to know their numbers. How many of you get that's really important? Okay. Why is that very important as far as a question? It's nothing that we need to get anxiety over. It's nothing that we need to, feel like we can't ask that question. The reason I'm saying this is going back to how I started my presentation this evening, which is this report right here. If they knew that right there on the Life Labs report, it said when your omega-3 whole blood scores is in the highest quartile, that's 6 to 10%, it was associated with an 80% lower risk of sudden death compared to individuals who were in that 2.1 to 4.3 range. And if you're between 8 to 11%, you've got the greatest protection. Don't you think that's an important message we need to tell friends, family, coworkers, people we care about? Shouldn't they know their number? Does that make sense, everybody? Is if all we're doing is we're getting people to know their number, we could be saving lives. Does everybody get how important this is? Once they know their number, if they want to get back into balance, then we can show them the solution, and the solution is quite simple. We already know that they are already likely taking something. We're going to show them something that works, and if they do, fantastic. We can do before and after blood work and illustrate that we now have them back in balance. That's all we're doing in this Zinzino business model. Does everybody get that's all we're trying to accomplish? We're trying to make a meaningful difference in people's lives. And by doing that, by asking the question, getting them onto a webinar or sending them a recorded video, what we're doing is we are transforming lives out there. And by transforming lives, we're able to now create a wellness business that can actually spread around the world and make a dent. Make a dent in our families, our communities, and our country so that we can actually help people feel a lot better and actually, you know what, thrive finally. Now, tonight is not about going through a lot of the income opportunity and the compensation plan. We do an exceptional job of that on the Saturday calls we do. So if you like what you've heard tonight and you see where we're headed, okay, we're at about 1 million customers right now, 1 million people balanced. Our goal is to get 20 million people balanced by 2035 and 100 million people balanced by 2050. It's an aggressive goal, it's an ambitious goal, but we need your help. We need your help to talk to people you care about and let them know that they need to get these numbers tested because they could literally prevent a big problem in the future. So that creates an opportunity. It creates a way for us to serve people. And if you like that idea, I invite you to join us on a Saturday event where you can learn more about the business end of things from some of our experts, some of our top income earners who have built businesses that now have replaced their job income or their business income, and they're now actually doing this full time, which is fantastic because today people are very concerned about AI replacing their jobs. Our economy is worse than it's ever been. Our currencies are crashing. Precious metals are skyrocketing. We're seeing this huge change happening in the world, and people are feeling they're no longer grounded, and they are looking for something to provide themselves and their future with something that has stability and something that has a future. So I just wanted you to know that Zinzino has that vehicle. We can make a difference, but we can do something that can actually change lives. And that's why I'm so excited to be sharing this with you this evening. So, with that, I know we wanted to keep this call less than an hour. If you like what you've heard tonight, the first thing you want to do is please, please, please thank the person who took the time to invite you on. Remember, some people get nervous when they have to share something, but the person that invited you on thought highly of you, they care about you, and they really want you to know your numbers. That deserves a thank you, that deserves an honor, that deserves a little bit of integrity. So please thank them. Whether you decide to get tested or not, that's up to you, but they did their part, which is they got you on this call to so that you know what you need to do next. So if you'd like that, get tested, get on the balance products if you need them. Remember, we get you tested first. If you're in balance, you may not need the balance oil, but if you're not in balance, you don't have to be scared. You now know we have a solution. And then if you're like, you know what, I'm also intrigued. I like the idea of creating extra income. I'm not sure what's going to happen with my job or business. I would love to learn more about that. Then ask them for our Saturday link. It's Saturday, 12 p.m. Eastern. We're going to learn from some tremendous field leaders. You're also going to get another insight in our product line, and you're going to see how the money works so that you can see if this is a good business opportunity for you as well. So with that, thank you everybody for tuning in. My name is Kareem Premji. I'm a holistic nutritionist and teacher here in Canada. And if you enjoyed tonight, I will post this video up in our team group chat list so you can review it again. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm on Instagram as kareem.premji, and you can find me there as well. So, with that, everyone, thank you. Have a great night, and hopefully, we'll see you on Saturday.
Thank you, Karim.
Take care.